Welcome to the Connected Spirit Podcast, a space where the mystical and the human experience merge, where we explore what it really means to walk a spirit-led path. I'm Courtney Dawson, an ethical medium and mentor, and for as long as I can remember, I have felt the presence of the spirit world. But my journey hasn't been simple. It's been one of self-discovery, healing from religious and emotional trauma, navigating fear, judgment, and the loneliness that comes with embracing something the world doesn't always understand. This podcast is here to take what was once considered woo and bring it into the real lived experience of being human. Because mediumship isn't just something we do, it's who we are. Here we dive into the conversations no one else is having, breaking down misconceptions, exploring the unseen, and normalizing the journey of deep connection. We'll talk about the beauty and the struggle of being a medium. We'll laugh, we'll reflect, we'll go deep. And most importantly, we'll remember who we are, why we're here, and how spirit moves through us all. So if you've ever felt something more, if you've ever questioned the unseen, or if you're simply ready to embrace the fullness of your spiritual path, you're in the right place. Hey friend, welcome back to the Connected Spirit Podcast. Today I'm joined by Tamara Scott, who is a psychic medium that uses her gifts to assist law enforcement and families with searches for missing people. And many of her high-profile cases have been featured in national news. For the first time, she'll be offering classes on missing person mediumship starting January 18th, 2026. The 8-week course provides tools, techniques, and hands-on practice on missing persons cases for intermediate and advanced mediums. I'm so grateful she's here to shed light on a part of mediumship that's often misunderstood, yet deeply needed. Tamara, so excited to have you on the show.
So grateful to be here.
I want to know everything about you. So you have a very unique work, but before we kind of delve into that, who is Tamara and what did life look like for you? And that led up to this place of now working with missing people, because there's a story behind the work that you do. And I'd love to look at that and hear about that.
Yeah, it's a big journey. And
Mm.
a life before I became a medium, I was actually a corporate executive hiding in the mediumship closet. And so, couldn't be who I was at work and did that for many, many, many years. But I really think that my journey began at birth. I was adopted as a baby, and I didn't know who I was, where I was from, who my parents were, the circumstances of my birth. So from the beginning, my life was a mystery. And as a child, I was a very, very early reader. My grandfather was into Ellery Queen and murder mysteries. And then I was into Nancy Drew, and then I was into true crime. I thought I wanted to be a homicide detective when I grew up. I lived in a really small town in Oregon, population like 3,000. And I was taken to my first crime scene in like junior high. There was a fire at one of my dad's buildings, and we went to it. There was an arsonist who was in town. And so that was the first crime scene and case I went to. And then in high school, I ended up solving a case of robbery at our high school. And so it was like that was the journey. But I went to college and I majored in technical journalism. And because I didn't want to go to the school that was teaching like homicide detective work and whatnot. So my path veered off. And for years, I was working in county governments, working in crisis communication, corporate communications. And then I worked for Fortune 200 companies when I moved down to California in 2000. And, I was just climbing the corporate ladder, doing my thing, but always using my gifts behind the scenes, being an empath, speech writing for high level executives because you could be them, and you could. So it's so funny how we use our gifts. But then spirit was like, okay, you're done faffing about. It's time for you to get to work. So in 2005, I was working for a major, major corporation. I had flown to Chandler, Arizona to go see some of my employees. And as I went to go into the hotel to check in, this guy was out vacuuming the red carpet. And it had just been vacuumed. I go up, I get almost to the door. There's a white feather. I pick it up. I go inside, I check in. I come out the door, the guy's still down at the other end with the vacuum. There's another white feather. I pick it up. I'm like, okay, I know y'all are trying to get my attention here. I get my bags, I go back in. I do believe there was a third feather involved coming up. And I'm like, seriously? And I'm looking for the birds up in the canopy. No birds. I'm like, okay, really? So I check into my room, drop off my bags, go have dinner, come back that night, take a shower, put on my pajamas. And back then they would have button lights in your room letting you know there was a message at the front desk. So I call the front
Yeah.
desk and I'm like, oh, you have a message for me. And they're like, yeah, we have a book for you here at the front desk. I'm like, what do you mean you have a book for me at the front desk? Who left it? And they're like, we don't know. It's just here and it's for you. Okay. Well, I'll pick it up in the morning when I check out. I'm in my pajamas, not coming down there. So next morning I get up, get ready, check out, and I'm like, do you have a book for me? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, well, who left it? They're like, we don't know. There's nobody here working who was here last night, and nobody saw who left it for you, but it's for you. Okay. Go to the airport, get on the plane. I'm flying home. I read this book. It's a woman who basically is working with law enforcement to solve missing person cases. And the sign that they kept sending her were white feathers.
Stop it.
Totally serious.
Oh
And
my
I started
God.
laughing. And I'm like, okay, what does all this mean? Is this like a, heads up? And three
Yeah.
months later, I had my first case. So 3 months later, I had given notice at my work that I was leaving. I gave my 2 week notice, fell off of a horse, broke my arm, had surgery. I'm in the bathtub with my arm in a cast, and my dead friend, that's a whole nother story. It's the case we'll talk about
Yeah.
later, came
Yeah.
to me in the bathtub and said, I need you to find me. That's how it started. So there you go. So that's how, I left my work in corporate America. And that's it. So I started working on my very first case, and it was my missing friend from childhood.
How does that even? I know like spirit can come in and guide us and influence us, but as a human, how do you even like process all of that? I mean, people are used to, I shouldn't say used to, but it's not uncommon to get one feather, but you're getting multiple. Some unknown individual sends you a book. These aren't just coincidences, these are full on messages. How does your human, Tamara, process all of that? Because there is a level of faith and trust that goes beyond just acknowledging a sign. This is like next level. How do you even cope with that?
Yeah. And I would say it's probably been pretty consistent throughout my life of having divine intervention. I have always felt divinely protected. I
Okay.
have always felt this sense of you are taken care of. We've got your back. And then just divine intervention. I mean, from crazy rescues from when I've had accidents or things have
Yeah.
happened and interventions and completely paranormal stuff my entire life. So, I didn't really actually realize I was a medium until about 2001. Like I had all
Okay.
this other stuff going on. I was, you know, completely empathic and very intuitive, but didn't even really know I was a medium until about 2001. And then I started working on that. And so it took from about 2001 to 2005 for them to say, okay, she's ready. Let's unleash the hounds. It's time for her to get to work. So,
And when you're doing this mediumship development, what does that look like for you? Because I know there's going to be listeners that go, I've been able to feel energy. I can pick up people's emotions. I get the repeating numbers, but how does that lead to discovering your mediumship abilities? What was that like for you? Because people are so curious. They're like, what happens when I take that leap, right?
totally. And I would say that for me personally, because I'm a bit older, there weren't workshops, there weren't webinars, we didn't have Zoom, we didn't have all these fantastic things that we have now. So I read every single book I could get my hands on. I lived next to a really famous metaphysical bookstore up in Los Angeles, and I swear I read the whole bookstore, just everything I could get my hands on. I'm a voracious reader. Um, I read 5 to 6 books a week. It's like I don't have television, so that's also weird. People go, "Oh my God, you don't have television?" Yeah, it's weird, but I love knowledge. I love information. So I was guinea pigging on myself and trying things, and I would read everybody's different books. Um, back in the day, it was James Von Prague,
Yeah.
Sophia Brown, Sonia Choquette, John Holland. Then John Edward, love John Edward still. He's like amazing. So for me, it was trial and error. And then just, the work meditation.
Yeah.
Um, and just working on myself, changing my diet, working on my exercise, working on my sleep, and adjusting and guinea pigging on myself to go, what happens if I eat this? What happens when I cut out all sugar? That was major for me. I was a sugar addict. So it's the things that you really need to be listening to yourself saying, how do I feel? How do I resonate? What happens when I try this? I'm not afraid to guinea pig on myself. So that's a key thing. Then the funny thing is, I never had any formal development until 3 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, I know, right?
Okay.
So there was nobody to teach missing person mediumship 20 plus years ago. They put me in the deep end with no swimmies and I just went for it. And I've made tons of mistakes and I had to really learn over the years. And what I'm really excited about now is that I now have the opportunity to give people shortcuts so that you can not make the silly mistakes that I made in the past or to use a technique that is going to get you accurate data. So
Okay.
it's super exciting. So that was it. I worked on my first case and
Let's talk about that. That
yeah,
first case, you're working with trying to solve the case of your friend. What does that look like? What does the case
yeah,
entail?
yeah,
And then I also want to know too, is did your friend from the other side help you with your investigation?
yes.
So
And
let's get into this.
she's still helping me to this day. So this is
Mm.
also the case that still haunts me. So
Okay.
this is the case. It's all in one. Her name was Katie Eggleston. Her father hired my father to come work in this small town in Oregon. My dad, while her dad and all the principals were helping to build our house, he was holding Katie, and rocking her while her mom was making dinner and they were all eating and, everybody was helping build the house and whatever. So since childhood, we were friends. At the age of 22 in Portland, Oregon, this case dates back to August 2nd of 1993. She was finishing up a sales call in downtown Portland and walked out of the building and they saw her car leaving the parking lot and that was the last time anyone saw her. Disappeared broad daylight, Portland, Oregon in August. It was a very hot day. Windows down, no air conditioning in her car. So there were other things that happened as far as sightings that had been seen. Her car was then discovered over near the Portland airport in an industrial park. Never seen from again. Now, my whole family was involved in the search. My father was in the car with her dad. They're over searching Portland. Um, Never found her again. So it was 2005. I'm in the bathtub, arm in a cast. I've just had surgery. What kind of shape are you
Yeah.
after having surgery to be doing anything besides sit in the tub, right? And she came to me and she was like, I need you to help find me. So that's when I started. So I basically was meditating. I was connecting in with her every day and using my gifts as I'd built up, working on my mediumistic abilities and following the information, piecing things together. So over the course of time, I was working on that case, and then in came a second case that was related to her case because a friend of mine whom I used to work with in a sheriff's department reached out to me and said, we need to know if your case with Katie is connected to this current case and that she was working on. And that's how I ended up working with a whole task force involving sheriffs, police, FBI, So it was very interesting how this evolved. And I didn't drive any of it. I was working full time. I was still working in corporate America, doing my full-time job, hiding
Yep.
all of this. Nobody could know about it.
Yep.
And then also when you're working with law enforcement, nobody wants to know that they are working with you anyway. So you are their deep, dark secret that you can't tell a soul, and that's it. And so every case I've worked on really has ended up now in national news. Like back in the day, to go national in the news was a big deal. Well, now it's in national news in 5 seconds because it goes over the internet and everything else. So
Yeah.
it's a lot different now, but some of my cases have been on 2020, Dateline NBC, and yet I'm always the person in the background, you know, who's providing intel. But to me, that's the honor. That's the part. You're a tool. You don't solve crimes. You don't solve cases. That's up to law enforcement.
Yeah.
But we're just kind of the secret magic sauce behind the scenes that can really help them to look in places they haven't looked, or to relook at something they're missing, or to help drive them to or to validate what's coming in. You'll know in advance,
Yeah.
and that's the magic sauce. So I do know where Katie is located at this time. The first time I went to search for her, I didn't have the right tools and materials and things with me to do a proper search. So I'm still working on recovering her remains,
Okay.
and hoping to go again this year now that I have more materials. I mean, what I really need is a cadaver dog, but I'm a cat person. So, and cadaver dog teams, by the way, won't work with you unless you're working with law enforcement and it's sanctioned, or else those dogs can lose their credentials for search. So,
So it's a lot to get law enforcement support backing you and doing this.
absolutely.
So this is why this case still haunts you.
This case still haunts me because law enforcement is absolutely not interested in, and this is something I've learned over the years, is that if you're working with law enforcement directly, things happen so fast. I've had a case resolve in 8 hours. I've had a case resolve in 2 days. We get the remains done. When you don't have law enforcement involved, or there are other aspects of the case that are preventing law enforcement from engaging on this case, you're dead in the water.
That must be so frustrating because you're somebody that is not just assisting law enforcement or wanting to, but you're also assisting the spirit that's working with you and doing this. How do you cope with that? That would be so, I would think, incredibly frustrating.
Yeah. Well, and that's why these cases haunt you, is that you still
Mm.
have the person showing up going, I'm still here. And I'm like, yes, and I'm still working on your case. I have cases that are open. Um, I have cases that are pending. We know right where the remains are. We know I have a couple of them like that. And the problem is, exactly where the remains are. You have everything on board, but you can't get involvement.
Yeah.
And that's why initially all of my cases, I was working directly with law enforcement. So I was like kid in a candy shop. You show up, it's so wonderful because you really can just share the net of what you're seeing. And it is not nice.
Yeah.
It can be rape, murder, torture, dismemberment, burying. It is not nice. But with law enforcement, you're able to be very clear and concise, and all they want is the net. They don't want any of the fluff. They don't want any of the woo-woo. They want just the facts. And
Yeah.
that's part of working with law enforcement. Completely different animal working with families. So yes, so you have three clients: law enforcement, the family, and the spirit world.
Yeah.
Spirit. And it's fat, and you're trying to make everybody happy.
Which is, and
And you keep changing hats.
oh God, that would be a lot. That is a lot. And I mean, you've been doing this for quite some time. So obviously, you have found your own way of being able to manage all of those different expectations from these individuals. That is a whole other ball of wax. When a family comes to you, right?
Yeah.
They're coming to you first what does your process look like? So practically and then also spiritually.
Yeah. When a family comes to me, generally, and I do have on my website, I do a free 30-minute consultation with a family regarding their case of their missing person. The only thing I want, so they fill out the form first, all I want is the person's name, birth date, last place they were seen, hopefully with an address, just an address. And any person they were with, their names, and any vehicles involved, car, motorcycle, boat, whatever. That's all I want. I don't want anything more than that. And I will do my own special technique before I get on the phone with the family. So they schedule an appointment with me. I have that. And what I do is I connect in with, if the person is in the spirit world and they truly are deceased, then I'm going direct. I'm going straight in with mediumship. And I differ than other people who work in this field. They like to do psychic detective work. Why wouldn't you just go straight to the source?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I like to teach, let's go straight to the source. Now, will you get psychic stuff? Of course you will. Will you get
Yeah.
stuff? But what I think is really important too is we start there and then we start to see what are you reading and whom are you reading? Are you reading the land of where they disappeared? Because maybe human trafficking was happening there. Maybe they weren't human trafficked. So you have to really be discerning. And this is just stuff I figured out over the last 20 years. So it's discernment and
Yes.
knowing how your gifts work.
Yeah.
And every single spirit is completely different when they come through.
What are some of the things your spirits that you've worked with have said to you about their cases, whether it be about themselves, their family, something that they want you to share with law enforcement? I'm so curious about that.
It's crazy. So within the last 2 years, maybe 3 years, it's really strange. Once I get the form on my computer that I have a new case that's coming in, I'll look at the person's name and I will get a word. I'm clairaudient primarily. That's my first gift, and then everything else kind of comes in as it wishes. Um, they've been giving me a word, and haunting words are like the first thing. One woman said to me, "I'm not where they think I am." Okay, so I had to figure that out over time. You're like, okay, and you write that down. The case I just worked on up in Sacramento, California, that resolved in 2 days. First word I got was water. I'm like, why are you telling me water? Okay. And then he just came in and dumped everything. And this is a gentleman who had cerebral palsy and was nonverbal his entire life. So
Okay.
he's actually able to now be able to communicate with me. And he had a grand time. His personality didn't change. He was swearing and dropping the F-bomb the whole time and flipping me off, which is hysterical. That's who he was in life. So, and his whole personality came through. And I was able to work with him. And, he told me, so normally when I do the technique that I like to use, I'm actually usually shown a movie. I go
Okay.
straight into the person. I connect in with them and I'm like, show me what happened. And they show it to me like a movie from beginning to end. And the nice thing is, I'm able to disconnect empathically from that. I can view it. I will feel things, I will smell things,
Mhm.
but it's not all in full immersive. They temper it a bit because it can be overwhelming.
Absolutely. And then that's going to hinder your ability to be kind of neutral to the information and affect your ability to stay with the facts. So in some aspects, you have to be kind of like the cops, just deal with the facts.
That's it. It's almost easier when you can kind of emotionally disconnect a wee bit and just kind of filter that or put it to the side
Yeah.
and just be like, I'm watching a crime drama on television. But the tough thing is we're empaths, we feel these things, and we're connecting in with the spirit. But for the most part, they want you to help find them or resolve the case. Sometimes it's not always finding them.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's we're looking for the perpetrator.
Mhm.
We're looking for pieces of evidence that can help the case. or we're looking for helping the family. The body has been returned, but they want justice. And
Now,
so that's interesting.
this is so interesting because I know there's going to be listeners that are thinking the spirit remains have been found, their human remains have been found. They're on the other side. They're wanting you to help find the perpetrator. What state are they in?
Right.
People are like, are they stuck? Are they in some kind of holding place? Can you describe your experience?
Yep. And there was a case I worked on out of Arizona, and the woman was a sex worker, and she had been sitting in rehab, and it was court ordered. And she basically was, does she check herself in for 90 days or does she walk out the door? And I sat there and I watched her while she was struggling with this. And she left. And basically, she went to go get another fix, and she was murdered. And they found her about a week later at the recycling plant. Basically, that she'd been thrown in a dumpster, and she was going through the recycling bin plant, and a worker there at the plant found her. So this is now 10 years later after this has happened, and the family reaches out to me and they're like, we want justice for her. And it was fascinating because I had tapped into her, and she's like, there is no justice to be found because he too is in the spirit world. He was a drug dealer and he was a pimp, and he was murdered 2 years after I was. So there's no justice to be had in this case. But she gave really important messages for her brother who had just come out of rehab 3 days earlier and said, I need you to stay the course. You need to do what I didn't have the strength to do. And then she had 4 children, and she had messages regarding the cousin who was raising her babies. And so she said to the family, I want you to let this go. It's time to move on. You have to live your lives and stop holding this. So there is huge healing that happens in this work. It's not
Yeah.
always find the missing person, find the body, find the remains. And that generally is just, by the way, the beginning of a very long journey. It just shifts everything on the physical plane. Then the family goes into grieving, and the family goes into their own journey because they will hold out hope until that DNA confirmation comes back every single time.
That must be so heartbreaking too, seeing the family and they're in this like holding place of not being able to move forward with their grief, to have some sort of closure. They're in this limbo. That must be so incredibly difficult to witness.
And you see them, and it's
Yeah.
tragic. It's tragic. And the interesting thing is that I feel like, because I was adopted when I was a baby and I didn't know who my birth parents were for 27 years and that mystery was unsolved, I know what it's like to live in that limbo. I know what that feeling is. It is not exactly the same, but it is similar, which helps me to be empathic with these families who are going through this. I know what they're going through. And then when I was 14, I'm going to say 14/15, my aunt was murdered. And so I know what happens to families when you have a family member who is murdered, how the family dynamics change, what happens with the kids, dealing with the estate, dealing with a court case, dealing with trial, all of this. So I understand. It's like the universe, this is what I came here to do. And I'm finally doing it. And it feels so good.
Absolutely, because you truly are helping so many people. You're helping the spirit person, you're helping the family, you're assisting law enforcement, and just in and of that, that creates a ripple effect of massive impact to the people that are being touched, even especially with the cases that you've worked on that have had national news. People hear these stories and it touches people. You can't help but be moved. This is just incredible. Tamara, there are people that have this misconception about psychic mediums' involvement in missing persons cases. What would you what would you want them to know about this? Because I find it's often like misunderstood. Like, what's one misconception that you want to like clarify and clear the air?
There are really good mediums out there who do this work in a
Hmm.
very ethical, grounded, professional way. And I really hope that we can continue to legitimize this really niche area of mediumship
Yeah.
and make it so that we really can be an integral part of families and law enforcement. I'm going to be happy the day we have a psychic medium embedded in law enforcement agencies, and or we have an organization where we work with organizations across the US. If law enforcement has a case and they need help, they call in. We have trained mediums. And here's the other interesting thing. Not every medium is suited to a case. In other words, um, if you have 5 mediums, 3 people may be hitting and getting accurate information and 2 aren't. And that doesn't mean that you're not, skilled. It just means that you're not resonating with this case or with those spirits, and maybe these 3 people need to work together on it, or just this one person. I have
Mm.
found in my cases that there is some personal connection between me and the family. Either they're from Oregon, the guy with cerebral palsy, he had leg braces when he was a kid, and so did I. And so we
Mm.
have pictures of us both in our leg braces. And, just things like that you find in every case. There is a reason spirit picks you specifically to work on the case. The other thing, too, is they come to mediums based on what is your life experience? What can we draw on to help you understand what happened? So they pull on your life experience. So it doesn't have anything to do, yes, does it have to do with your skills? Of course. But I think it has to do with the love in your heart,
Yeah.
your experiences, your skill level. Are you ready? They're going to push you all the time. They're going to keep pushing you.
Definitely. And
Very,
that makes sense too, because I've heard this quote, a good medium has a well-lived life, meaning you've had a variety of experiences that the spirit world can pull from and use as references in the communication. And what you're saying is very similar, very
absolutely.
similar. For mediums that are listening or to mediums that are really drawn to this work, what qualities or like preparation do you feel that are truly essential? Because not everybody's meant to be doing this work.
No, mm-mm. In fact, this is absolutely not for everyone because
Yeah.
you are really highly empathic and you are triggered by crime, gore, you know, um, I do not recommend you
Yeah.
try this branch of mediumship at all. Now, if you have been a true crime junkie, you are into, you know, um, television shows on whodunit and, all of
Yeah.
that stuff, absolutely, this is right up your alley. And I would say explore it. It doesn't mean you have to do it full time or whatever, but get yourself in a position where you can partner on a case with somebody who is seasoned and trained and see if you like it. It's not saying you have to do it all the time, but I'd say try it out and see what you think. But I can tell most people who end up in this line of work, they're in. Like they're like, I've been drawn to this my whole life. I need to know the truth. I need to solve the mystery. I don't care how ugly it is. If I know what it is, I can deal with the truth. I can handle it. It's
Yeah.
searching for the truth.
Oh, this is so fascinating because when you're saying stuff about, are you like the true crime junkie? Do you like those television shows? My mom and I joke because I love them. I binge watch them like it's ridiculous, but it doesn't disturb me. I'm fascinated by human psychology and what makes people tick. And it's interesting because I'll watch the shows and I tune in psychically. I don't try to connect with the spirit. I tune in psychically. And I already know who's going to be found guilty before the show within
Oh,
5 or 10 minutes. And I go, oh, well, but you got to play it through and watch it. And I go, that's interesting. But for myself, my heart goes out to the families. Like it's so sad when people's departure is tragic, graphic, horrific. We never want anybody to ever experienced that, we know as mediums who communicate for those on the other side that their soul's at peace. They're not stuck or
Right.
anything. Many of them want justice, all of
Yep.
that, but
Yep.
they're not stuck. But there's those that are left behind, and my heart really goes out to them. I go, "Oh my God." So like you have to have a really strong, I don't want to say backbone, but this strong core within you where you can separate that empathic abilities and really turn it down so you can do the work.
You have to. And two, if you don't, there's a point where you have to care but not carry.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a huge thing, in other words, because if not, you've got to be there and be strong for the family, but you've also got to disconnect. And
Yeah.
that's important. And the recent case I just had up in Sacramento, the guy with cerebral palsy, um, he came through and gave me a full on the whole enchilada before I even got on the phone with the family the next day. And I'm like, I knew I had him when I was, I said the first thing that he did was flip me off. And then he told me to F off. And they laughed and they went, "That's him. You have him. That's who he was." And I'm like, because I'm like, I've never had this happen. I've never had a spirit do that to me ever in my entire life. So, and so,
Yeah.
and then what he really said was, basically the state dropped the ball on his caretaking and his caretaker murdered him. Put him in, I kept seeing him in water and like a tub of water. But because he was in a handicap apartment, he had like a roll-in shower. And the caretaker had murdered him and then put him in literally a tub, like a big crate tub thing, and filled it with water and different solvents to diminish the smell. And so and he was in water, literally. He was in the bathroom, in the shower, in a tub, in water. I mean, it was like, and the first word he had said to me was water.
Yeah.
And so now what's happening is the family is going through the court process. They were just in court um, on Friday, and she has been charged. And I mean, cases don't normally resolve this fast. I have
Mm.
been going on 15 years. I have cases that have been going on that I still have open, but I have four brand new cases that are sitting here. Some are fresher than others. Some people have just been missing a year or two. But Courtney, there's over 500,000 people that are reported missing just in the United States alone every single year. And that was like in 2024 alone. And of those, still 93,000 of those 500,000 still reported missing. Our work is needed.
Yeah.
People need us. Families need us. Law enforcement needs us. And we need to really step up our game and keep stretching ourselves and our abilities and what we can do. And also, I'm going to caution there are a bunch of really not nice people out there that front as mediums or say they're mediums and call up families and say, "Well, I'll tell you where your loved one is for $10,000."
Yeah.
And that is not okay. If I take on your case, there is no charge for my services. I work for free at this point. Because
Yeah.
I've just got so many, we'll see how much longer I can do this, but it's still not going to be, I'm always willing to consult on cases. And for law enforcement, my services have always been free. So for now, we'll see how things go in the future because I see really a future where we're going to be able to legitimize this profession and really have it be an integral part. We're just like a tool. We're no
Yeah.
different than a computer, than a cadaver search dog. We're just another tool that law enforcement has at their disposal to help solve crimes.
It really is a need. I mean, there is violence, there is crime, there are accidents that happen, and people need answers. People need closure.
Awesome.
This is so fascinating to me. I'm loving this conversation. For somebody who's listening, who's waiting for answers about a loved one, what would you want them to know?
They're in the spirit world. They're fine. And what I found magical is that a lot of them want their families to know they love them, that they're fine, and that they are not defined by what happened to them.
Yeah.
Remember the love and the joy and the fun times that you had, but they're still with them. They're around them all the time. my case up in Sacramento, he's telling me what he wants them to do. I said that during the very first initial screening, and 3 days later, the family had a new Facebook page up so that families could go in and register complaints about what was happening with caretakers in the state of California. He got
Mm.
action.
Yeah.
He said, I want them to be held accountable. They're now working with a lawyer to ensure that the state is going to be held accountable going forward because his case was egregious. And so good things can come out of really horrible things. And I think that's the other beautiful thing I've seen of this is that families who have experienced incredible loss. Case in Colorado, I worked on a missing girl who was pregnant, murdered by her boyfriend. He's now in prison, um, life sentence, no parole, but he refuses to say where her remains are. We know where they are. We have three different law enforcement agencies who can't decide who has the jurisdiction to go and authorize the cadaver dog team to just go and confirm that's where she is. And so, but the mother, in the meantime, went and started missing person day in the state of Colorado. So I have seen families who have channeled their grief and their love for the victim and their loved one into something incredibly powerful so that these missing people aren't forgotten.
Yeah. And they're
That
coming to
mom,
you. They're
that
coming
mom still doesn't have her dog back, have her daughter back. And by the way, if anybody does have a cadaver dog team that you're willing to run on cases just to train, let me know. Always looking for somebody who would love to go and test on a site. I've got sites, I have places.
this is just so wild to me. I just go, wow. I'm so just flabbergasted and in awe of what you do because it is not for the faint of heart, like at all. But it is, I can see and feel, and I know the value that you bring to all of these individuals. Let's shift gears a little bit before we wrap up. What is something that keeps you feeling joyful and grounded daily?
Oh, wow. Okay. I have the most amazing husband on the planet.
Okay.
I have my cat named Sparky. He's black, he's adorable. And, I think it's being of service to people that keeps me going. And in the meantime, if I'm working on a case that's really, really heavy, I will get outside, be in nature. I arrange flowers. I love to cook. I play the Celtic harp. Um, I drink a ton of tea. And I think we have to keep living our lives and be filled with joy. You
Yeah.
know, our our reason for being here is to be of service and to connect the spirit world with the physical world. Um, but it's also bringing that joy of the spirit world into the physical, you know, and just having fun. I think it's laugh as much as you can and be grateful. Be grateful that we can show up and do this work. Be grateful that, I mean, how many people decide I'm going to be a medium when I grow up? Oh, heck no. I was going to climb the corporate America ladder and I was successful. I did amazing things, but nobody is like, I'm going to be a medium. I'm going to go find dead people and I'm going to talk to dead people for a living. You don't decide that, you know. And so I just feel like, in this life, find your joy, find the things that fill your soul, that make you happy, that you can be grateful for, and that be curious, keep exploring, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. Because it's nice. The spirit world can actually fix where we screw up, where we think we've screwed up something and, oh no, I did that wrong, or I was wrong, or whatever. It's like, no, they can come behind you and fix it. It'll right itself. So don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Love that. What's a book or film or podcast that has really shaped you in a meaningful way?
Wow. Okay. My latest obsession is John Edwards' book, Chasing Evil.
Okay.
Um, it's brilliant. And it's so funny because he works the same way I work. So I'm reading this and like I've done this for 20 years and I never told a soul what I was doing up until recently. And then it was like, I'm really uncomfortable. I don't do social media and I've had to do that. And I've been in the closet for so long in the shadows doing that. And it's like, oh my gosh, I've got to out myself. This is so uncomfortable because it's very easy just to be behind the scenes bringing order out of chaos.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Absolutely. Tamara, I just want to thank you for sharing your heart, your experience, and your compassion with us today. These are very deeply moving conversations with the spirit, and you are just bringing so much light and some of the most challenging experiences that people, unfortunately, have had to navigate through. Could you let our listeners know what you have up and coming, how they can get in contact with you?
I do. For the first time, I am teaching missing person mediumship classes. They'll start in January 18th of 2026, but I will be teaching them later on this year too. So if you catch this podcast afterwards, don't worry, I'm going to have classes later on this year. If you have a missing person or missing loved one, I give free 30-minute consultations. My website is www.tamarajscott.com and book a free 30-minute appointment. Enter the information I'm asking. Nothing more. I don't like to feed the medium. Just keep it simple what I've asked for. If I connect them with your loved one and you validate every single thing I come through with, because it's so important, we've got to validate the information coming through, then I'll consider taking your case. So classes coming up, cases coming up, we'll see what happens. I don't know what's next. Spirit always has a funny way of, shoving you out into the limelight whether you're ready or not. So here I am. So thank you for this opportunity to share what I do with others.
Oh, you're so welcome. It's really been such an honor to connect with you, to learn a little bit more about you and your story. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. This is incredibly meaningful work and such a very beautiful and unique way of working mediumistically. And I just wish you all the success.
The Connected Spirit isn't just a podcast, it's a remembering of who we are, a remembering of our connection to spirit, and a remembering that we are never walking this path alone. Mediumship isn't just about speaking with spirits, it's about deepening the connection to our own spirit, to one another, and to the energy that moves through everything. So as you leave this space, ask yourself, what part of this conversation stirred something within you? What connection is spirit inviting you to strengthen? If this episode spoke to you, please share it, leave a review, and connect with me on Instagram at Medium Courtney Dawson or visit my website at mediumcourtneydawson.com. Your presence in this community matters because connection isn't just about what we seek, it's what we are. Until next time, trust your spirit, trust the unseen world, and trust that you are always, always connected.